No knock, no warning, just that confident swagger. His dark eyes smoldering like embers, his crisp white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up, forearms flexing slightly as he leaned against her door frame. Tasha didn't need to look up to feel the shift in the air. Their chemistry was a living thing, an undercurrent that sparked even in his silence. He stepped closer, closing the door behind him. The faint click echoed in the room, and with it, her pulse weakened. Long day? His voice was low, a familiar velvet that slid under her skin. She exhaled sharply, eyes slightly on her screen. Kelechi, I'm working, she said quickly, trying to focus on her laptop, her hands slightly trembling. But he didn't listen. He was already beside her, his fingers brushing her neck lightly, teasing, setting off sparks despite her resistance. Tasha stiffened. Not now. But Kelechi wasn't listening. In one swift movement, he was at her desk, his fingers brushing the edge of her cheek, tilting her chin up so their gazes locked. I don't want to wait anymore, Tasha, he murmured. You are my wife. You belong to me. You always have. She swallowed, her breath catching. She felt the heat of his body close to hers, the magnetism of their connection still so potent. But this time, something inside her pulled back. I'm not in the mood, Kelechi, she said firmly, her voice quieter, more controlled than before. I'm tired. Please, I need space. But his expression darkened, frustration creeping into his eyes. You always say that lately. You're always too busy for me. His voice, once filled with warmth, now carried a sharp edge. Tasha stood up quickly, her heart racing. Kelechi, please stop. I said no. But he didn't stop. His hands were on her now, insistent, demanding, pulling at the buttons of her blouse. His lips crashed against hers, aggressive and unrelenting. She recalled, pushing him back with every ounce of strength she had. No, I said no. Welcome and welcome back to my channel. The Abuja skyline shimmered with twilight hues, casting golden reflections on the glass walls of Tasha's sleek office at Maitama Heights. The city's heartbeat was steady, cars weaving through traffic, the distant hum of life outside and within her office. The rhythmic click of her keyboard punctuated the silence. Tasha brushed a stray curl from her face, her sharp eyes fixed on the Lego brief sprawled across her desk. She was the epitome of power, tailored black dress hugging her cuffs, stilettos kicked off under her desk, her mind a fortress of discipline and ambition. Kelechi knew how to keep her on her toes. Their relationship had always been filled with stolen moments, encounters in places as unexpected as the back of a taxi or in the quiet corners of a dimly lit cafe. Tasha never knew what to expect next, and it was part of the thrill. One Friday evening, after a grueling week of back-to-back meetings and high-stakes negotiations, Kelechi surprised her with a message, "Meet me at the pool." She raised an eyebrow, a smirk tugging at her lips. It was almost midnight, and she was about to head to bed when she received it. She didn't question it. Arriving at the luxury hotel's rooftop pool, she saw him standing by the edge, his silhouette outlined against the sparkling city below. He turned as he heard her footsteps, and the mischievous glint in his eyes was enough to set her pulse racing. I thought you could use a break, Kelechi said, his voice smooth like melted chocolate. Without a word, Tasha stepped closer, her fingers brushing against his chest, feeling the warmth of his body through his shirt. This isn't a break, she whispered, her lips barely an inch from his. This is torture. Kelechi chuckled, the sound deep and familiar. before cupping her face and pulling her in for a kiss. She let him take the lead, her body already responding to the familiar touch. His hands slid under the hem of her dress, pulling it up as he kissed her deeper, making her forget everything except the heat between them. It wasn't long before the water in the pool became their secret stage, each kiss more desperate, more urgent than the last. The coolness of the night air didn't dampen the fire that burned between them. Later, after their bodies had become tangled in the sheets of their hotel suite, their whispers filled the room, just as heated as their torches. They were a force, an unspoken connection that had always been their bond. It wasn't just at night that their chemistry ignited. They had a secret rhythm, even in the daylight hours. One afternoon, Kelechi picked up his wife, Tasha, from her office for lunch, and the drive was filled with teasing glances and half sentences. The back of the car was quiet, save for the soft hum of the engine. Suddenly, Kelechi's hand slid across the seat, his fingers brushing her thigh. The simple touch was enough to make her breath catch in her throat. Her body leaned closer, craving the familiar electricity between them. "Not here," she whispered, glancing nervously at the driver. "Then we'll make it quick," Kelechi murmured, his lips brushing her ear. The car's interior grew hot as he guided her hand to his lap, and her fingers found the unmistakable proof of his desire. Tasha's heart raced as she played along, teasing him in return. He gripped the back of her neck, pulling her in for a kiss that was filled with passion and desperation. The car ride turned into a frenzy of anticipation as they pulled into the parking lot of their destination. They shared a laugh, but the intensity between them hadn't diminished, it only grew. They had spent most part of their lives together, a series of stolen moments, teasing, giving in, and sometimes pushing each other to the edge. It was effortless, their connection like a dance they knew too well. Even their friends always talked about how strong their chemistry was. But somewhere along the way, that dance would change. By the time the next month rolled around, Tasha and Kelechi were living in a constant state of magnetic pull. The days were full of steamy glances, whispered words, and flirtatious touches, moments that made the ordinary feel extraordinary. Their connection was undeniable, but lately, their busy schedule no longer gave them the time for their steamy moments, especially Tasha's job as it grew more demanding and her husband also grew more demanding. Something felt different. It started with small things. Kelechi's touch lingered too long, a hand on her back that seemed to possess a weight she didn't want. The kisses had become more insistent, more urgent, and though she was no stranger to their passionate exchanges, there was an underlying push, a silent insistence that made her uneasy. One Friday afternoon, just as she was wrapping up a presentation at work, her phone buzzed with an incoming message from her husband, Kelechi. "Can't wait to see you tonight, my love. I want you. I need you." Her heart fluttered at the words, but an odd discomfort settled in her chest. She wasn't sure why, but a subtle change in his tone over the past week had been impossible to ignore. Later that evening, she met him at their favorite restaurant, a quiet place that felt like their own little world. Kelechi was already seated, his usual charming smile in place, but there was something in his eyes, a hit that made her wonder if she had misread their earlier moments. As dinner came and went, their usual banter faltered. Kelechi's hand brushed against hers under the table, but it wasn't the playful touch she had come to expect. It was possessive, deliberate. His thumb traced circles on her skin, and though her body responded, her mind pulled back. "Tasha," he said quietly, leaning in close, his lips brushing her ear. "You are all I think about." The words sent a shiver down her spine, but not the kind of thrill she was used to. Something about the way he said it felt almost urgent, like he was pushing for something more than she was ready for. She gently pulled back. "Not tonight, Kelechi. I'm tired." His smile faltered for just a second, but he quickly recovered, slipping back into his usual charm. "We'll see about that." The next day, Tasha was working late in her office again, the building dimly lit and quiet around her. She was accustomed to solitude, her mind lost in the work that demanded her attention. But when Kelechi arrived, unannounced, it felt like the world shifted. She didn't hear him enter, not at first, until he walked in. No knock, no warning, just that confident swagger. His dark eyes smoldering like embers with desire. It was as if the room itself held its breath. His crisp white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up, forearms flexing slightly as he leaned against her door frame. Tasha didn't need to look up to feel the shift in the air. Their chemistry was a living thing, an undercurrent that sparked even in his silence. He stepped closer, closing the door behind him. The faint click echoed in the room, and with it, her pulse quickened. "Long day?" His voice was low, a familiar velvet that slid under her skin. She exhaled sharply, eyes slightly on her screen. "Kelechi, I'm working," she said quickly, trying to focus on her laptop, her hands slightly trembling. But he didn't listen. He was already beside her, his fingers brushing her neck lightly, teasing, setting off sparks despite her resistance. Tasha stiffened. Not now, but Kelechi wasn't listening. In one swift movement, he was at her desk, his fingers brushing the edge of her cheek, tilting her chin up so their gazes locked. "I don't want to wait anymore, babe," he murmured. "You belong to me, you always have." She swallowed, her breath catching. She felt the heat of his body close to hers, the magnetism of their connection still so potent. But this time, something inside her pulled back. "I'm not in the mood, Kelechi," she said firmly, her voice quieter, more controlled than before. "I'm tired. Please, I need space." But his expression darkened, frustration creeping into his eyes. "You always say that. You're always too busy for me these days." His voice, once filled with warmth, now carried a sharp edge. Tasha stood up quickly, her heart racing. "Kelechi, please stop." "I said no." But he didn't stop. His hands were on her now, insistent, demanding, pulling at the buttons of her blouse. His lips crashed against hers, aggressive and unrelenting, as if this was something he had already claimed. And just like that, the line was crossed. She recalled, pushing him back with every ounce of strength she had. "No, I said no." There was a moment of silence, an uncomfortable, suffocating silence, before Kelechi finally took a step back. His chest was rising and falling rapidly, his face flushed with frustration and anger. Tasha's heart was pounding, her hands trembling. She knew this was a pivotal moment. She couldn't ignore the surge of fear that suddenly flooded her body. She had never felt so vulnerable, so trapped in her own skin. "I'm sorry," Kelechi muttered, his voice low and filled with regret. "I didn't mean to push you." But the damage had been done. And in that moment, something inside Tasha broke. The days that followed were tense, filled with awkward silences and strained conversations. They couldn't look at each other the same way anymore. The passion that had once been a fire between them now felt like a distant memory. Do you think Kelechi should apologize to Tasha? Will Tasha forgive him? Will the law of a marriage remain the same? Watch out for the next part. Let's see what eventually becomes of Tasha and Kelechi's passionate marriage. And don't forget to subscribe so that you will be notified when the new part drops. Love you!